Welcome to the AV-42C. First, let's keep the bird from rolling away by using the Now let's move on to the startup sequence. First, turn on the main battery. This will store power for all of the electronic equipment on the aircraft. Now start the auxiliary power unit, or APU. This will keep the battery charged while we wait a moment to allow the APU to spool up. We're now ready to start up the engines. Keep an eye on the engine gauges and wait for the RPM to settle. The engines are now supplying electrical power, so we can turn off the APU. Now we can turn on the heads-up display. The HUD, or heads-up display, shows you attitude, altitude, velocity, targeting reticles, and other important flight data at a glance. Now turn on the multifunction displays, or MFDs. The MFDs give you access to aircraft features such as weapon configuration, navigation maps, sensors, etc. You can access these features by pressing the corresponding buttons around the edge of the monitor. You'll learn more about the features of the MFDs in a later tutorial. The vehicle is now ready to fly. In the next tutorial, we'll talk about basic flight controls, taxiing, takeoff, and landing. Welcome to the AV-42C. First, let's keep the bird from rolling away by using the Now let's move on to the startup sequence. First, turn on the main battery. Now start the auxiliary power unit, or APU. This will keep the battery charged. Wait a moment to allow the APU to spool up. We're now ready to start up the engines. Keep an eye on the engine gauges and wait for the RPM to settle. The engines are now supplying electrical power, so we can turn off the APU. Now we can turn on the heads-up display. The HUD, or heads-up display, shows you attitude, altitude, velocity, targeting reticles, and other important flight data at a glance. Now turn on the multifunction displays, or MFDs. The MFDs give you access to aircraft features such as weapon configuration, navigation maps, sensors, and etc. You can access these features by pressing the corresponding buttons around the edge of the monitor. You'll learn more about the features of the MFDs in a later tutorial. The vehicle is now ready to fly. In the next tutorial, we'll talk about basic flight controls, taxiing, takeoff, and landing. Welcome to the basic flight tutorial. We'll skip the startup procedure now and pick up where we left off in the last one. The main flight controls are the joystick and throttle. You can grip them by holding the grip buttons, or toggle lock your hands to them by tapping the grip buttons. Let's start with taxiing. Grab onto the main flight controls now. To steer the front wheel, you'll have to twist the joystick on the vertical axis. In order to get moving, we need to tilt the engines to the forward position. Start by holding the throttle trigger to lock the wheel brakes. Then, press and hold up on the throttle thumb control to tilt the engines forward. The indicator here shows the status of the engine tilt.
트로틀
Welcome to the basic flight tutorial. We'll skip the startup procedure now and pick up where we left off in the last one. The main flight controls are the joystick and throttle. You can grip them by holding the grip buttons, or toggle lock your hands to them by tapping the grip buttons. Let's start with taxiing. Grab onto the main flight controls now. To steer the front wheel, you will have to twist the joystick on the vertical axis. In order to get moving, we need to tilt the engines to the forward position. Start by holding the throttle trigger to lock the wheel brakes. Then, press and hold up on the throttle thumb control to tilt the engines forward. The indicator here shows the status of the engine tilt. Now if you release the brakes and slightly lift the throttle lever, you will start to roll. Apply small amounts of throttle or brakes to control your speed. Don't go too fast. Try taxiing over to the marked waypoints. Welcome to the basic flight tutorial. We'll skip the startup procedure now and pick up where we left off in the last one. The main flight controls are the joystick and throttle. You can grip them by holding the grip buttons, or toggle lock your hands to them by tapping the grip buttons. Let's start with taxiing. Grab onto the main flight control. To steer the front wheel, you will have to twist the joystick on the vertical axis. In order to get moving, we need to tilt the engines to the forward position. Start by holding the throttle trigger to lock the wheel brakes. Then, press and hold up on the throttle thumb control to tilt the engines forward. The indicator here shows the status of the engine tilt. Now if you release the brakes and slightly lift the throttle lever, you will start to roll. Apply small amounts of throttle or brakes to control your speed. Don't go too fast. Try taxiing over to the marked waypoints.
Over T. Over T.
Okay, stop here.
Over D.
Throttle down and hold the throttle brake trigger. Let's prepare for a conventional takeoff. Set the brake lock so you can free up your hands. Remember, if your hands are locked to the controls, you have to tap the grip buttons to set the flaps to position 1. Make sure all flight assists are enabled. They should be already. Double check that the engines are tilted all the way forward. The indicator should read 0. Now grab the throttle again and hold the brakes. While holding the brakes with your left hand, you can disable the brake lock with your right hand.
Chap, flare. Chap, flare.
Okay, now taxi onto runway 20. Now to take off, raise the throttle to full and steer to keep aligned with the runway. Keep speeding up, straight down the runway. Now carefully rotate the droid. Great, you're in the air. Now you can raise the landing gear and set flaps to 0.
Landing gear.
Now gently steer your nose up to about 20 degrees and keep climbing. Let's practice with the basic flight controls. Rotate the joystick left or right to roll towards your target. Rotate the joystick forward or back to pitch your nose towards it. This icon on the heads-up display shows your velocity vector, which is the direction you're actually moving. Fly over to the target waypoint. Try to keep your movement smooth and avoid pulling too hard, as this can cause a stall. Great. Fly over to the next waypoint.
Over T. Over T.
Great flying. Now let's try landing at the airbase. Start your landing at the next
Over
waypoint. Bring your speed down as you approach it. This will be a conventional landing on the runway. Line up with the runway and continue to bring your speed down. You can use the trigger on the throttle to control the air brakes. Free your left hand to bring your flaps and landing gear down. Then continue to bring your speed down.
Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear.
Maintain your speed and glide slope. Keep your vector on the target. Getting close. Prepare to flare your nose up for a nice smooth landing. Touchdown. Gently bring your nose down now. Keep steering. Congratulations. This concludes the basic flight tutorial. Next time, we'll make use of the tilting engines and practice vertical takeoffs and landings.
Left engine failure. Left engine failure.
Welcome to the basic weapons tutorial. Today we will be covering weapon configuration, target acquisition, and firing weapons. Let's start by setting the MFDs to the pages we will use. The Equip page shows what you have on each of the vehicle's equipment mounts. It displays information on each item and allows you to arm, disarm, configure, or mark them for jettison. We'll go over each feature in more detail later. The TGP, or targeting pod, is what you will use to acquire ground targets. To use it, first you must supply power to the sensor mounted underneath the nose of the vehicle. The TGP will be in forward mode by default, which just looks straight forward. To be able to control it, you must designate the TGP as the Sensor of Interest, or SOI. Now, you can sleeve the targeting pod around using the thumb control on your joystick. When you move the sensor, it'll automatically switch to target mode, which locks its focus point onto the ground while you're flying. The yellow arrow on the screen shows the relative bearing to the target point. The target point also shows up on the nav map as a yellow cross. Now let's find some targets. Take off and fly to the objective waypoint. We'll pick it up when we get there.
Landing gear. Landing gear. Altitude. 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 Over T.
Now that we're in the area of operations, you can enable the master arm switch. With the weapon system armed, you will see some new icons in the heads-up display. At the center, you have the weapon targeting reticle, or PIPR. Up here, you have weapon type, name, and shots remaining. You can cycle through all the armed weapons by pressing the button on the joystick. These unguided weapons can be fired simply by pulling the trigger on the joystick. You have limited stores, so save your rounds for the targets. Let's try deploying the GAU-8 on some ground targets. In a moment, you'll receive a mission objective. You can auto-slew your TGP to the objective waypoint by pressing the waypoint button in the TGP screen. Go ahead and destroy the tanks at the objective waypoint. job. Now let's work with rockets. Hydra 70s are small, unguided rockets. By default, each pull of the trigger will fire one rocket. However, they can be configured to launch rapidly. This is called ripple firing. To access the weapon's config menu, set the equipment MFD page to config mode. Then select the weapon. If you have multiple of the same weapon sight mounted in different locations, your settings will be copied over to all of them. Try setting the rockets to different ripple intervals and destroy the next set of targets.
Over T. Over T. Shoot. Pull up. Pull up. Altitude. Pull up. Altitude. Over T. Over T. Shoot. Shoot.
Well done. You've destroyed all of the targets. This concludes the basic weapons tutorial. Welcome to the Vertical Flight Autopilot training. Vertical flight can be tricky, but by using the autopilot, you'll be a master in no time. First, make sure the engines are tilted at 90 degrees. Enable the Hover Autopilot mode. Also, enable the Altitude Autopilot. The Hover mode will assist you in staying upright and keeping your horizontal velocity under control. The Altitude mode, when combined with the Hover mode, will take control of the engines and convert inputs into climb or descent rates. In this mode, keeping your throttle lever centered will hold you in a hover. Then you can raise or lower the throttle to climb or descend. You can check the position of the throttle lever on the altitude control status indicator on the HUD. When using the Hover Autopilot modes, keep your left thumb away from the tilt control. Any engine tilt less than 90 will disengage the Hover Autopilot. Go ahead and lift the throttle to full to take off. Keep climbing until you reach your target altitude. The autopilot will limit your ascent rate to a safe speed. Okay, now set the throttle lever to the midpoint to hover at this altitude.
우와, 되게 신기하다.
Now you can use the joystick to move around horizontally. The hover autopilot will handle attitude control, so you just have to tilt the joystick in the direction you want to go. You can also twist the joystick to yaw. You can keep track of your relative horizontal velocity by using this indicator on the HUD. As you move around, study how the autopilot handles the vehicle. It'll help you when you try manually flying it later. Let's try flying into some targets. Try hovering at the next series of waypoints. Great, now let's try to land back in the helipad. Bring yourself to a stop by centering the throttle to hold your altitude and steering the stick in the opposite direction of your horizontal velocity indicator. Use your yaw control to rotate towards the helipad. Begin to move towards the pad. Adjust your altitude control and steer your velocity vector so that it points just above the pad. As you approach the pad, slow your forward speed and rate of descent by pulling back on both the throttle and the joystick. Remember to keep making very small adjustments. Adjust your rate of descent and bring it down nice and gently. Touchdown. Throttle down and enable the brake locks. Congratulations, that completes the tutorial. Next time we'll learn about manual vertical flight and transitioning into horizontal flight. Welcome to the Air-to-Ground Missile Tutorial. Air-to-ground missiles, or AGMs, are useful for precisely hitting light to medium armored ground targets. First, power up the targeting pod. You will use the TGP to designate targets for the AGMs. Now arm the weapon system. And switch to the AGM-114. These are small, laser-guided anti-tank missiles. Since they home in on the laser point emitted by your TGP, you must maintain line of sight to the target until it hits. To fire it, designate a target using the TGP, point your aircraft at the target until the missile locks on, then pull the trigger to fire. You can also switch the missile seeker's uncaged mode to manual, which will allow you to fire at targets off foresight. In manual mode, you hold the trigger to uncage the seeker, then press the weapon switch button to fire. Try shooting the targets around the mission waypoint using the AGM-114. Remember, you need to maintain line of sight with your TGP in order to guide the missile to the target.
Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot disengaged. Shoot. Shoot. Shoot.
Great. Now switch to the AGM-65. This is a larger, slightly heavier hitting anti-tank missile with a more advanced optical seeker. With this type of missile, you do not need to maintain a lock on the target after you fire it. The fire and forget capability allows you to fire at multiple targets in one pass or take cover after firing. Try taking down the targets at the next waypoint and practice taking advantage of the fire and forget capability.
Shoot. 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 Shoot.
Nice shooting. This concludes the air-to-ground missile tutorial.
Pull up. Altitude. Altitude. Altitude.
Welcome to the radar tutorial for the FA-26. Today you will learn how to use the radar to find and track other aircraft, as well as designate targets for air-to-air missiles. First, open the radar MFD page. The radar must be manually powered on using the radar power switch. The display shows you a compressed representation of the radar's 120-degree field of view. The display range can be adjusted using the R+ and R- buttons. Press the R+ button repeatedly until the display is at max range. As the radar sweeps over other aircraft, they will be displayed as blue icons for friends and orange icons for foes. The left to right scan angle can also be adjusted to allow the radar to scan more rapidly but in a smaller slice of the sky. The number shows the angle in degrees off bore sight. Set the radar as a sensor of interest. Now you can slew the target designator using your joystick's thumb control. Slew the designator over a contact and press in on the center of the thumb control to start tracking it. You can track up to 4 contacts while still being able to scan the rest of the sky. They will appear as a small circle on your HUD, along with the corresponding number. In order to lock a target for weapons, you can either click the track again using the designator, or press the numbered MFD button on the left. While the target is locked, the other tracks will continue to be displayed, but the radar will not be able to scan for new targets. Information about the locked target's bearing, range, altitude, airspeed, and aircraft type will appear on the bottom right of the display. Use the unlock button to unlock the target and the clear button to clear the tracks. For close-in engagements, the radar can be switched to bore sight mode using the mode button. In this mode, the radar will point straight forward and lock onto the first contact it sees. If the radar is SOI, you can press the joystick thumb control to quickly unlock and find a new target. Now for some weapons practice. Good. Now arm your weapon system and switch to the AIM-120 radar-guided air-to-air missile.
Autopilot disengaged.
On the HUD,
Autopilot
the locked target
disengaged.
will appear as a small
Autopilot
square.
disengaged.
The small dot is the shot lead cue. When firing air-to-air missiles, aim for the lead cue to help the missile conserve energy as it steers toward the target. The DLZ, or Designated Launch Zone, is displayed on the right side of the HUD. The missile should be fired when the target chevron lies between the min and max range marks.
Shoot.
Go ahead and try shooting down the target.
Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot disengaged. Pitbull. Shoot. Shoot. Pitbull.
Splash. Good kill. By tracking multiple contacts, you can fire up to 4 AIM-120s on separate targets, as long as you maintain line of sight with each of them. When the AIM-120's time to impact counter displays the letter M, it has switched to active homing, and you no longer need to continue tracking it. You can switch to another target, duck into cover, or even shut your radar off. Now try shooting down the rest of the enemy air targets.
Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot disengaged. Pitbull. Pitbull.
Welcome to the SEED tutorial. SEED stands for Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses. You'll use a combination of radar detecting sensors and special weapons to disable SAM sites. When a radar is searching for aircraft, it emits a signal that can be detected by your radar warning receiver. The radar type, bearing, and approximate range is shown on the RWR display relative to your position in the center. Open the anti-radar attack display. The display shows the same information gathered by the RWR, but allows you to select targets for anti-radiation missiles. You can also set the radar sources to be displayed as diamonds in the HUD. When you lower the AR visor, you'll be able to see all of the targets around you for better situational awareness. Now you can use your joystick thumb control to slew the targeting cursor. Slew the cursor onto the enemy radar, then press on the thumb. A square will appear on the selected target in both the MFD and the HUD. Now arm the weapon system. And switch to the AGM-88. This is a high-speed fire-and-forget anti-radiation missile. When fired, it'll home in on the radar source designated in the ARAD. Once you have a target selected, all you need to do is fly towards the target and fire once the missile is in range. Try taking out the SAM radars using the AGM-88.
Autopilot disengaged. Shoot. Autopilot disengaged. Shoot. Shoot. Shoot.
Great. This is the end of the SEED tutorial. This is Command. Get in the air as soon as you can. We know the enemy artillery have been mobile for a while, so they're probably just across the lake by now. I'll keep you updated if we find any other threats. Kilo 1-1, we sent you the GPS data we have on the artillery group's last known movements. I recommend you search that area for the targets. Enemy strikers have popped up on radar coming from the east. We can't let them fire on our supply depots. Take them out now.
Kilo 1-1, Overlord. Pop-up Group Bra 08625, Weeds, HUD.
Over T. Over T.
We've got a pair of enemy fighters making a beeline for our AWACS. If they destroy it, it'll be hard to keep track of incoming threats. Try to keep that AWACS alive.
Engaging targets. Kilo 1-1, Overlord. Pop-up Group Bra 03935, 16,000, HUD, Fast.
Fox 3.
Over T.
Enemy bombers spotted coming from the north. They pose a serious threat, so don't let them get any closer.
Kilo 1-1, Overlord. Pop-up Group Bra 35035, 9,000, tracking west.
Fox 3.
Over T. Shoot.
I missed my
Over
target.
T.
Incoming missile, I'm going evasive.
Pitbull.
Fox 3.
Pitbull. Chap. Flare.
Missile evaded.
Pitbull. Shoot.
Splash.
Over
Fox
T.
3.
Missile launch. Shoot. Over T. Over T. Over T.
Fox 3.
Shoot. Shoot.
Splash. Kilo 1-1, Overlord. Hostile Bra 299, 12, 18,000, trekking south. Fast. Hey, leans on Overlord. My missile missed.
Shoot.
Fox 3.
Pitbull. Shoot.
Ah, my missile missed.
Shoot.
Fox 3. Kilo 1-1. Overlord. Bandit Bra 2-8-3. 30, 25,000. Cold. Fast. Leans on Overlord. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Overlord. We're going down.
Over T. Over T. Over T. Over T. Over T.
Splash! Hostile down!
Over T. Over T. Over T. Over T.
Fox 3.
Chap. Flare. Over T. Flare. Chap.
My missile
flare.
missed.